Hello and welcome to Post-Exertional Mayonnaise, a podcast about living with ME and chronic illness, creativity and making meaning. I'm Daniel, and today I'm joined by Patricia Fortlage, who's an award-winning photographic, long-form storyteller and fine art photographer from California with a focus on female empowerment. She was recently featured in the US September Digital Photographer magazine, and she's had artwork photography displayed in various exhibits across the US. So it's a real privilege to have you with us, Patricia. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Brilliant. Um, I know you do photographic work across various different sort of spectrums, and you've travelled the world, and you've sort of had projects doing various different things. But we're kind of interested in your sort of chronic illness story, and particularly in your recent project Lemonade. So before we get into that, do you want to tell us a bit about your chronic illness journey and how that's impacted you? And yeah.
Yeah, sure. So my journey started over a decade ago. I was actually working in corporate America. I was working in San Francisco, and one day I left office really late and I was walking down the street heading towards public transit. And all of a sudden, it was like somebody pushed me and I kind of stumbled like I was drunk or something. And it was just out of the blue. And I thought, oh, that's really strange. So I came up to the corner waiting. I waited for the stoplight before I crossed the street and got across the street and started walking down the block. And it was as though somebody put their hands on my shoulders and just shoved me to the ground. So I went down to my hands and knees. I didn't hit my head, but when I looked up, the world was doing this. It wasn't
Mhm.
spinning, but it was just like this vibration back and forth. And all of a sudden, I became so weak. It was as though I couldn't even get up.
Wow.
It was as though I had just run a marathon. You know, you've seen those marathon runners, they get to within three
Mm.
feet of the finish line and they just collapse because there's just nothing left to give. And it was just the strangest thing. So, fortunately, a taxi was heading towards me. I flagged him down and went to the emergency room. And then it started. My heart rate was in the 40s. Like I said, I was super weak. I had all sorts of weird things going on in my head. And so for about 2 years, I was in and out of the hospital with them trying to figure out what was going on. What was this all of a sudden onset of stuff? Um, the blood to my eyes was limited, so I ended up with my eyes going so crossed and so down that I couldn't see anything. They declared me blind, and I eventually had surgery for
Wow.
that. But there were just all of these different things, and eventually they figured out that I had a couple of things: that I had myasthenia gravis, and that I had Sjogren's syndrome. And of course, what I've learned since then is that if you get one neuromuscular or autoimmune disease, you're gifted with five others. They all seem to come in these groupings. It's buy one get five free sort of thing.
Mm.
So there have been other things along the way, and myalgic encephalomyelitis has been the most problematic, I would
Mm.
say. Um,
Mm.
and then other things like osteoporosis. So I ended up breaking my back very easily. And so it's been tough. It's been a struggle
Mm.
because you end up having to see all of these different specialists. I don't know about over there, but here the doctors all specialize and they only focus on their one body part, even
Yeah.
if what you have is systemic. So you end up having to manage all of these different doctors, and uh,
Mm.
so that's been my journey now for quite a while. And like I said, the thing that's most problematic at this point is the weakness from myalgic encephalomyelitis.
Mm. Yeah. It just seems to. Um, I'm really fortunate because I'm fortunate, I suppose. I don't know if it's the right word, but I just live with ME, but it seems um, all encompassing, and yeah, it impacts my life in massive ways. But it must feel really hard work having to deal with all these other conditions and the symptoms, and then sort of pain management and everything else that comes on top of it with other surrounding conditions, comorbidities, I guess, is that what they call them, on top of the ME. So yeah, it must be hard work for you. Yeah.
Well, it's
Um,
interesting because some of those things they found incidentally, right? Because here, not too many medical professionals understand myalgic encephalopathy. Honestly, not too many believe in
mm,
it, even.
yeah.
So, they're still trying to find other things. And if you start looking hard enough, you will find other things. Oh, did you
Mm.
know you have this? Oh, did you know? I mean, it just happened to me this morning. Oh, did you know you have nutcracker syndrome? Like, oh, of course I do. Sort of thing. So, yeah, it's kind of an interesting phenomenon with the way the medical system is built over here. Um, yeah,
Mm.
it's a lot
It's
to
a
manage.
challenge. Yeah. 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 Yeah, you're definitely right about doctors not knowing about ME or not understanding it, or yeah, and the post-exertional malaise side of it is has a huge impact. And I think when then you're going to hospitals for other conditions, they don't understand or take that into account, do they? So it's really hard work, isn't it? Yeah. Um, so where did your interest in photography start? Was that something that was you've been doing that a long time?
Yeah, so yeah, I've had that interest for a very long time. I can't even remember when I first picked up a camera, but growing up, I always felt super creative and I had a very difficult time finding an outlet for that. I tried drawing and painting, and oh, that was awful. I had no talent
Mm.
there whatsoever. I made wedding dresses to help work my way through college. So I had fashion design and I had that, creative outlet there. But I don't know. I feel like I was always trying to find my path, and photography fit really well for me because there's kind of a structural component. There's very much a right brain, left brain component as opposed to simply right brain creative.
Mm.
And I think that was part of what was confusing me, is not understanding myself well enough. So eventually I really started focusing on, the photography more, and it really felt like home,
Mm.
so that was always kind of there, but I didn't really start the professional aspect of it until after I got sick, actually, or right around that same time. I was working in corporate America. I had a big, corporate job, and um, anytime I had time off, I would go volunteer overseas, not as a photographer, just as a human.
Mm.
And there were times that came up where, whatever the group was working on, they needed to document something, and somebody was always saying, Patricia, go grab your camera. And of course, I always had it with me. And so that happened often enough to where I realized that, wow, A, I really like this. And B, this could be a full time thing. And it just felt so much more rewarding. So I made that transition and worked overseas in developing countries mostly for most of my documentary career. And but of course the health thing kept ebbing and flowing and playing a part. And now, right around the time COVID hit, was when I really took a dive with my health. And
Mm.
I just can't throw everything on my back and lug it around out in the middle of Africa
No.
somewhere anymore. So now I'm transitioning more to fine art work and other work, some work with nonprofits here in the United States as well, but a lot more solo work and
Yeah, yeah. So, talking about Lemonade, what prompted you to start documenting your own chronic illness experience? Because it's a very sort of personal journey, isn't it? But it's also, you describe it as like a love letter to the chronic illness community, and I love the way that you worded that on your website. And there's something quite special about the way that you've presented the images and with the text as well. So where did that come from in terms of thinking, oh, I need to get this out there, in terms of your own journey with the chronic illness?
yeah, it's kind of a weird thing, I have to say. I really, the thing that I like the most working overseas with all of these nonprofits that were focused on disease and poverty, they were doing such amazing work, these medical teams. And me, I was always behind the scenes. Like I was a support
Mm,
person. I always considered myself a worker bee, you know, and I liked that. I like being behind the scenes. So when I got sick, there were a few times where doctors that I was working with, excuse me, they were suggesting, oh, you should write a book or something. The way you approach being a patient, it's very organized. I'm very data driven. So I do a lot of research. And when I approach a doctor, I approach it like we're creating a partnership, like
mm,
they're a consultant. And so a lot of doctors have said you need to share that with people. You need to
mhm,
share how to be a patient kind of thing. And again, writing a book, no, 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 no. That's just not putting myself out there like that. That just didn't feel right. And so there's always been a little bit of a push to share my story and how I manage things, but it's too much about me. So I've never wanted to do this. And the only reason that I'm coming around to it now is because I feel like I'm so far down the journey of my disease that there might not be a lot of time left for me to do this type of work. My physical abilities are a lot more limited. Um, I mean, it's getting harder and harder to manage this disease. There's more pain, there's more limitation, there are more physical limitations, and yet the longer this goes on for me, the more medical professionals I deal with, or the more I deal with the general public, and the way that they treat women
mhm,
is so appalling to me. And almost everything I've done in my career has been related to making life easier for women. That's just
mm,
something that's been important to me from the beginning. Working overseas, I learned that there were all of these studies that were done that um, if you focus your efforts on women, entire communities will be raised. And
mm,
so it's just been a common thread through most of my work. And so dealing with the medical community and all of the experiences I have as a woman, and there's a lot of oppression, there's a lot of condescension. I mean, it's crazy to me. And I
mm,
realize that it's that way for everybody, but my experience is as a woman, and I see how other women are treated, and so I guess that just built up so much to where I thought, okay, I do need to do this. And even though I didn't really want it to be about me, I felt like that's really the best way to share the, I mean, I can't speak for everybody's experience. I can only speak for mine, but I think it resonates with a lot of people. And so I
Mm.
thought, okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna put myself out there and be in the front, you
Mm.
know, cringe. But but yeah, so that was kind of a long way of answering your question, wasn't it?
No,
But
no, it's fine. It makes sense, and yeah, it'd be good to talk more about the impact on women as well. But I've got some other questions as well before. But so for you, particularly with the Lemonade as a project about your own chronicles journey, but it's also, I guess, the theme of it is like, I think you said on your website, if, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade, sort of thing. So it's trying to find, it's about trying to find beauty in the disastrous sort of circumstances that you're living in, and for you, you focus a lot on sort of fine art, but you've also got this sort of documentary sort of background, and there's a sort of clear crossover there in this project, isn't there? And was that hard to sort of find the balance between the two, or did it come quite naturally in terms of the images that you were choosing?
yeah, to be honest, I it it's kind of an easy thing in that my goal is how do I represent this aspect of my illness in the most clear way possible, the one that makes the most sense, the one that somebody who is not going through this could look at it and say, "Oh, that's what you're dealing with," or "Oh, that's what that is." And so with that being the goal, if I can accomplish that with a simple documentary approach. So, for example, I need to have an MRI, and here's what it looks like when I have an MRI. That's a pretty easy photojournalism type shot,
Mm.
right? You just take a picture of me heading into the MRI. In other situations, though, like really trying to describe the weakness of ME, that's a difficult one because, at least in this country, we have this term. Well, this term exists everywhere, chronic fatigue syndrome. But in this
Yeah.
country, chronic fatigue syndrome, or the word fatigue in general, is really kind of considered the wastebasket. It's sort of
Mm.
where doctors dump you when they don't really know what else to do or say, or they just kind of place you in this oh, you're fatigued, oh, you need a vacation, or it's not fatigue, though, at least not for me. It's a weakness.
Mm.
It is that
Mm.
marathon runner that gets within 3 feet of the finish line and just collapses, and they can't
Yeah.
lift their head, let alone move another inch. Their only hope is to another runner to come by and help them cross, and then they
Mm.
collapse again, right? They're just that spent. They're that weak.
Mm.
And I thought, how am I going to help people understand that it's a battery issue? I don't
Mm.
have much battery to start with. And then the charging process is so
Mm.
slow, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So in that regard, I couldn't think of anything that would be just a straight documentary type shot. I needed to create something, and I do a lot of fine art work. And so I combine the two in that image where I've just woken up and I've got this big jug of batteries with a straw in it. And it's like I'm just trying to suck up as much battery juice as I possibly can, right? So it
Yeah.
really is determined by what end pictorial that I think will best convey. I'm not confining myself at this point. I know some people look at the project and they say, oh, well, you don't really fit into the photojournalism category, or, oh, you don't really fit in the documentary category, so
Mm,
we're not interested, or, oh, yeah, that's just, fine art. So, but not all of it, and so there are a fair amount of people that are like, oh, yeah, you don't fit it. I'm not really worried about fitting into a category. I'm worried about
mm,
helping people to understand what it's really like, you know? I had a person
mm,
recently who saw I did this image, I don't know if I don't think we've talked about it yet, where I'm lying on the ground, and then there's another image of me peering down at myself going, "Oh my gosh,
mm,
who am I? Am I even me anymore?" And somebody reached out to me recently and they said, "Gosh, I have been trying to describe this sensation to my husband. And I saw this image and I went, here, you know, and he got it." And I thought, that's it. That's,
mm.
that's it. That's my goal. Thank goodness I accomplished it in one image, for one
Yeah,
person anyway.
yeah.
So, yeah, so yes, there is a crossover for sure. I'm honestly using all of the tools and skills in my arsenal to try to make this as user friendly for as many people as possible.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, that was one of the images that. Yeah, it'd be good to talk. I think I picked like five out from the project, but I would really encourage people to go and to look at your website because there's such a sort of array of different types of images there. But that was certainly one that Am I Me that I picked out with you lying on the grass and then almost this like ghostly image of yourself kind of like from above. And yeah, it does resonate, doesn't it? Because uh, it's um it's almost like you looking at yourself, but looking at this sort of ghostly figure of yourself above you, and it's sort of almost like a bit esoteric in the sense that it's there, but it's not there, and that's how it feels living with Emmy, isn't it? It's very much like we're sort of like in this ghostly sort of like life that we live. It's yeah, it's really striking, and yeah, I think that was a really was that a sort of Photoshop type kind of thing, or did you how did you kind of come about making that image?
Yeah, so I took two different images. So those are both actual shot in the camera images. The one where
Oh
I'm above, I had used I had I had I used all my spoons for this, by the way. I
wow.
balanced myself on this really narrow um what do you, like a bar stool kind of thing. And then I just took the bar stool out of the picture in Photoshop, and
Wow.
then I just overlaid the one image onto the other. So it's not as fancy of Photoshop work as many people could do. That's really not my skill set. I
Yeah.
tried to get most of it right in the camera, but I really I, there were, I felt like there was a lot to say in that image, similar to what you were saying. And in addition, I felt like, the top person, because it is kind of a ghostly figure. It,
Mhm.
it also reminds me of how easily people just look through us. At
Mm.
least for me, a lot of people have sort of faded out of my life because I'm not as fun anymore. I can't
Mm.
do everything that I used to do. Or, for a lot of people, after a while, your illness just gets boring to them, that they're
Mm.
bored of it and off they go. Or they just kind of start seeing through you. They're just
Mm.
not that interested in,
Mm.
what's going on with you physically. And so I thought that would be important to show. And then, I don't know if it's hard to see or not, but the where I'm laying on the ground and I've got my head focused towards the camera, I tried to have I tried to have this look on my face that was sort of like, yep, really,
Mm.
you know, here we are, really? Kind of thing. So yeah, that was a fun shoot, but it was also very exhausting trying to
Mm,
balance myself for that second one. The one lying on the ground was
mm,
nice. That was pretty easy. But
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Um, the first photo in the collection is called The Breath, and that's you with like butterflies on your face, and that's quite a stunning image because it's set with a black background as well, so it's very striking in the fact that it sort of stands out from the background quite well. um and that was you've written short pieces after each image about each picture and what you were trying to portray, and that was talking about finding beauty in the sort of mess in a sense, and that's just a lovely image, and yeah, I appreciated that, and it's do you want to tell us a little bit about kind of thinking around that one?
Yeah, so for that one, that was the sort of the main goal is, well, there were two main goals. One, showing that there is still beauty in those of us who just happen to have these other things that we're dealing with now, you know. It's not like our entire previous life just poof, you know, went away. We're still here.
Mm,
And
mm,
and even though there are lots of challenges, a lot of us are really making the best effort we can to make the best of this. So we are still finding beauty and seeing beauty. And
mm,
the other thing for me on that image is I included the oxygen cannula in that shot to show that um, to really show that duality of yes,
I hadn't noticed that. I'm just looking at it now.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's yeah,
very subtle. I
subtle.
know,
Yeah.
it's really interesting. That is has been one of the most popular images from the series. And every now and again, I ask my friends, I'm like, do you think they notice? Like, some people, purchase it to hang it on their wall, and I'm like, do you think
Yeah,
they notice that there's an oxygen cannula? Like, are
yeah.
they going to notice that one day and go, oh,
It's out.
why do I have that hanging over my dining room table?
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah, I wanted to, really kind of highlight, like you said, that duality of, and a lot of us are super optimistic. So I wanted to kind of
Mm,
show that optimism as well. I don't know that it's always great to be glasses half full, but it's
mm,
it's helped me in many, many ways. So yeah, that was
mm.
that one.
Yeah, and then you touched on hold your breath earlier, which is like a picture of you getting up in the morning with an eye mask over your forehead and batteries in that are you drinking from it, or is it kind of like um it looks
That
like
was,
that?
yeah, that was the intention. Yeah, I had a really big long straw that I put in there, and so I was kind of sucking on the straw, and with the batteries representing the need to recharge.
Yeah. And it's
And
something we talk about a lot with ME, don't we? We talk about kind of being low battery or not having or having broken batteries or yeah. But it's the first time I've actually kind of seen it represented in a way like that, sort of trying to recharge. And it's a very the analogy is brilliant, and it's I think a lot of people will resonate with that, and sometimes it feels like you try to recharge and actually you're not really getting it there anyway because maybe the batteries are flat in the first place, sort of thing. So yeah, it's yeah, I
or
really
you just
really
can't
like that one.
hold it, right? You get a little bit of a charge, but then just the slightest thing, just poof, done. It just
Yeah,
takes all of it. And it definitely
yeah,
takes me a lot longer I mean, even just for the littlest of recharge, it takes me so much longer than it
mm,
ever used to. So, yeah, I think
yeah,
there's more that I could do around that image, but there are
yeah,
other things that I'm trying to
yeah.
communicate as well. So that image where I look like I'm holding my breath or I'm
Sorry, I
gonna,
got them mixed up. Yeah, that was called recharging. So yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
the other one was actually Okay, so I admit it. I just have a very strange sense of humor. I I just one day I just got so frustrated by yet one more person telling me it's all in my head. I hear
Mm,
that all the time. I mean, all my female friends that have chronic illness were constantly talking about this, how, we're so dismissed and, oh, it's just all in your head. And so I kind of just wanted to make fun of that. I just wanted to make this image that made my head look like it was so big that it was holding
mm,
everything. And then my feet are these tiny little, comic things down
mm,
below. And I don't know. That was just kind of a spoof on the whole, it's all in your head sort
yeah,
of
but it still
thing.
fits in well with the rest because the style that you've kind of like gone with and your style of photography, it just neatly fits in, even though it is a bit of a comic image. It kind of it flows really well. So yeah, it works well. Um, and then yeah, the hold your breath one was really interesting because it I had to have an MRI scan before I was diagnosed with ME the second time, and it's a really, if you've never had an MRI scan, it is like a really sort of weird experience, isn't it? Because you're sort of going into this thing, and what surprised me was like the noises. Because they say sometimes they give you like CDs to listen to or music or something, but they didn't offer me that. It wasn't like, it was just like in you go there, and I just imagined there's lots of kind of like buzzing noises, and then there's like beeping noises, and then there's like sort of almost like knocking sounds, and it's,
Pounding.
yeah, and it's sort of really it's a really sort of I'm trying to think of the word. It's quite a visceral. That's probably the word I'm thinking of, like experience, because it's so there. But you've had to kind of go through that a number of times, and it's was it quite difficult, like getting permission to take that photo, or were they all right with somebody taking that picture of you in that setting?
I'm so glad you asked that question because those are always the kind of questions I have. I'm always
Right.
curious about things like that.
I was just like really intrigued. I was like, did you just go up to them and say, "Can we take a photo," kind of thing, or um,
I did actually. I asked them if I could take a couple of photos of the scene, and they said, "Well, there are limitations." And they were very
mm,
clear about what the limitations were. Like I was not allowed to take pictures of the area where they actually look at the images because that's all of their proprietary software and hardware and all of that, and there could potentially be other patients identifying,
mm,
whatever. And so I said, okay, well, what about just the machine? I'd really love to get a picture of me um, in the machine, like shot kind of in, so you could I didn't quite get that because obviously I wasn't the one taking the picture and the tech wasn't exactly a photographer, but
yeah,
he said, yes, I can do just, you on the table on the machine. And so he took that one and then he did slide me in and take another one, but it was too high of an angle that really all you were looking at was my feet. Whereas I had kind of hoped that we could get one that showed just how close that thing comes to, just how
mm,
claustrophobic it is, right?
mm,
But yeah, I was able to get permission for just kind of that parameter, which was fine.
mm,
I was really grateful for that.
mm. And yeah, it works really well in that. There's that duality there as well for you, isn't there? In the sense that it's a very physical, um, practical medical exam that you're having, but there's also the sort of like question mark around many chronic illnesses, but particularly like ME and CFS, in terms of like the psychologization of it as well, in terms of yeah, it being all in your head, and that, yeah, it's very stark in terms of, yeah, portraying that. So it works really well, and that maybe brings us on to the last picture that I thought would be good to look at, which was file 13, which is basically a waste paper bin with files in it, medical files and photos. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? And that, because that leads on to the whole idea of, or the very real experience, particularly for women, of not being listened to and not being believed when it comes to sort of healthcare. Do you want to sort of talk around that a little bit?
Yeah, that's exactly what that was intended to represent. So the wastebasket in the, next to a metal file cabinet with the medical chair in there. So, representing, you're in the office there or in the exam room, and out you walk, and poof, there goes your file right into I call it the chronic fatigue bin myself, but over here we have this saying, file 13. Oh, you don't know where to file that, or we don't need that anymore. And you can just toss that in the file 13, kind of thing. And so obviously they don't physically throw files away. I just want to be clear. I'm not suggesting that of anyone, but that is the representation for how often we are dismissed. It's our experiences often are very condescending, and we're um and there also seems to often be a direct correlation between how experienced the medical professional is in the conditions that we're trying to assess. You know, a lot of doctors don't even believe in ME. So their immediate reaction is it's all in your head, or you don't know what you're dealing with, or what you're experiencing. Again, maybe you need a vacation, or I've got a good psychiatrist you could talk to. That whole thing. But the reality is it's just that they don't know, right? And so trying to work with them and trying to help educate them, um, you put effort into that, into hopes that eventually you'll get someone that will say, okay, well, I personally don't know about this, but let's see what we can do. But for whatever reason over here, doctors are very hesitant to say, I don't know. So instead of that, you get this, it's all in your head,
Yeah.
or just this week, I met with my rheumatologist, and she tried to do something similar, but the phrase she used was, so you're sure seeing a lot of doctors there, Patricia. Like it was a bad thing. She completely weaponized that phrase. And of course, I just said, well, of course. I mean, when you have a systemic illness, you have to go see all of the different specialists, because you folks only specialize on one body part and you don't talk to each other. So, yes, that is incumbent upon me to go see the many consultants that I need to see in order to, you know, make my life a little more livable. But it was just really fascinating to me how she thought that was just going to dismiss me and we could just move on in our appointment, and so.
Do you feel there's an element there, like, do you feel, because you would hope as a woman you'd be maybe treated more favorably by female doctors, but do you find that that's not the case either?
No, I don't know. I feel like there's a real, I'm not sure if it's an arrogance or if it's an insecurity or if it's both, but there is definitely a trend that if a doctor does not know about something or understand something, I've had very few who had the confidence to say, I don't know about that. That is such a rare thing. The more common thing is to be dismissive. And I don't know if they're afraid that if they don't come off as all knowing and what have you, that their credibility will be lost. For me, it's the opposite. I would much rather have a
Mm.
doctor say, I don't
I
know. I
don't
don't
know.
know to
Yeah.
that, you know?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
It's a real
Um.
problem, though. It really,
Mm.
really is a problem. And part of it, I understand, you know, they get all of this training, they come out of medical school, they hit the ground running, only to find out that over here, the insurance companies are kind of running the whole show. You get
Yeah.
15 minutes I mean, what can you do in 15
Yeah.
minutes, you know?
Yeah.
And these doctors have these huge panels of patients. So, are they going to do anything after work to research your disease or see how
Mm.
better they can help you? I mean, they're exhausted, you know? So,
Mm.
yeah, there are lots of issues. There's no one place to put the
Yeah,
blame.
we could talk about sort of medical gaslighting for a long time, couldn't we? It's
Yes.
I think that it's difficult over here because we have like a national health service, so we're sort of like stuck with, it's almost like what, unless you do go privately, it's like you're stuck with what you're given effectively, or you have to sort of really knock on doors hard to try and get any sort of progress in terms of yeah, like people taking an interest in your condition, and yeah, and so often it feels like you are dismissed, and yeah, that comes across really well in your file 13. But I do wonder, like when I was diagnosed the second time, I had an ME as a teenager for about 6 or 7 years, and then I got ill 20, and I recovered and got ill 20 years later, in my late 30s, and I do wonder. It seemed it was a difficult process getting that diagnosis, I, but I maybe saw my GP like 3 or 4 times, and then I saw a specialist and had an MRI scan to rule out maybe like MS or something, and then eventually my GP agreed to diagnose me, but um, it wasn't it it wasn't the same as, and maybe that was because of my past history, but it wasn't the same as having um months and months and years of questions and not being diagnosed. And I think for women, that tends to be the case more. And I do wonder, like, if I'd been a woman from a an ethnic minority or from any other sort of background, whether I would. I mean, I was like a social worker, so I was a professional sort of middle class male, and I do wonder how differently I would have been treated if I hadn't been that sort of standing in society. And yeah, it does make you think, and I do feel like I got off lightly there in a lot of ways, because maybe that's, yeah, that men are treated differently when it comes to that. I don't know. It's interesting. But
I think about things like that too, because I know
hmm,
that it's even worse for my sisters of color here.
hmm,
So I do think there are, sort of different categories. And that's something that I talk about in the project as well, is it really matters how I go to an appointment. It matters what I
hmm,
wear.
yeah,
It matters how I approach the situation. If I approach the situation as, we're partners, I need your expertise as a consultant. I have my body, and I've got a whole hive
hmm,
mind of experience and research. So, we need to go at this together. And if I do that and share with them that I'm very data driven, I get a very different response than if I go in and I'm not very well dressed and I'm just like, help me,
hmm,
forget it,
hmm,
So it's yeah, it's such a shame. It's really
yeah,
travesty.
yeah, yeah. So just before we wind up, like I was just wondering, um, in terms of sort of like the project, the Lemonade project that you did, how did you manage the desire to complete pieces for the project against the need to look after your own health? Because you've obviously put an awful lot of energy into that. Was that a real challenge in terms of sort of managing your desire to be creative in that way, but also sort of like making sure that you did all that recharging and looking after yourself? Was that quite a challenge?
Yeah, so you hit on the challenge. The challenge was what was going on in my head. I'd get these ideas and I would want to go do them while the idea was fresh. But the reality is I can't do that. This project is completely determined by my health. I do things when my body allows me to do that. When I have ideas, I jot down a lot of notes, or, if I see, if there's, I don't know, at one point I saw some fashion outfit or something and it gave me an idea. So I took a picture of that, and so I start kind of accumulating things. But as far as actually putting the shoots together
Mm,
and making those happen, I don't really get a lot of say in that. That just,
mm,
I try to plot out when I might like to do that. And I do try to store up my batteries. Um, and sometimes I can do a little bit, sometimes I can do a lot, sometimes I can't do any of it. So that really is all completely determined by
mm,
my health, which is which means the challenge is, how do I reconcile this really, this excitement that I've got in my brain and this idea that I want to, see through right now while it's fresh. And that's really challenging for me because
mm,
I've always been this real type A kind of person, this go-getter, work hard, let's do
mm,
this. And um, that's a hard thing to calm down
mm.
in your brain and just lay there and accept, okay, my body's not moving. So Patricia, let it go.
Yeah.
You may never get to shoot that frame. You might not. You may.
Mm,
So it's a weird thing in my brain, but pretty straightforward physically, honestly.
mm. Yeah. Well, it's been a real um, pleasure to talk to you about your work, and thank you for kind of coming and talking to us. And have you got plans to sort of continue the project or do other photography work? Have you got things coming up, or is it going to be a case of just sort of like taking it a step at a time, depending on your health?
Yeah. First, thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed this. Uh, I
Yeah.
didn't realize I had so much to say. So, that, um, yeah, I think I'm going to continue this project until I run out of scenarios, as soon as I
Mm,
run out of, things that I think will make a difference. I'm hoping to manifest a book deal, something like that to, really pull it all together. In the meantime, bits and pieces of it are being shown in different exhibits, and I have a solo show coming up in January with
wow.
this. And and then, yeah, there have been a couple of other things that have come up with, like the USC medical program approached me recently about maybe doing an exhibition there, in conjunction with their science department, and how they are looking at some of these body systems and what have you. So I'm just going to kind of go with the flow and continue on as I can. And then I don't know. After that, we'll see what the next cause against women might be. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I'm still able, who knows?
Yeah, no, and I'd really encourage people to go and look at your website and look at the Lemonade project, but also look at some of the other work that Patricia's done because it's inspiring and it's encouraging and yeah, it's just some really good photography and yeah,
Bless you.
I
Thank
appreciate.
you. That's so nice.
I appreciate it just looking through it and preparing for us talking. So yeah, thanks a lot for chatting and we'll look forward to seeing what's next for you as well. So yeah, it's been good to talk.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much.